Hello, welcome to the class on Jewish law. We're learning about the 3 weeks. We are in the Mishnah Berurah Siman Tavkuf Nun Beis 552 Seif Gimel, and we're learning about the final meal before Tisha B'Av happens. This is the last meal that we eat before the fast, and there are certain laws that apply to that meal. So far, we learned that you're only allowed to have one dish during that meal. We learned other things because the idea is we don't want it to be a festive meal, since it's a meal right before Tisha B'Av, the greatest day of a Jewish mourning. Now, we did say the custom is to have a piece of bread and an egg dipped in ashes. That's what most people do, but there are nevertheless certain laws about technically what you could have and what you couldn't have. So these laws aren't as, I would say, relevant as other laws we'll learn, but let's learn it anyway. Afilu bishel min echad b'shtei kederos. If you mikri shnei tavshilin, we said you're not allowed to have two different dishes at this meal. So even if you cook two different dishes, you cook one dish in two different pots, that's still considered two different dishes. So you can't do that. Mishnah Berurah here says mishtei kederos perish she'echad bli lasa ava ve'echad bli lasa racha. He says like this: if you're cooking the same exact thing and you just need a lot of room, so you have two pots, that's fine. But if the foods that you're making, one has like a thick batter and one has a not thick batter, a more liquidy batter, then that is a problem because they're technically two separate dishes, and we're not allowed to have two separate dishes for this meal. Continues the Shulchan Aruch. You also should not have a dish which is two types of food in the same pot. Unless it's something that's always cooked together the entire year. We'll see some examples. So he says right here, Kagon afunim, like certain seeds, shenostim alei betzalim, that they put onions ubeitzim on them. So you cook a whole dish with seeds and onions and eggs. So people don't back in the day, they didn't usually do that the whole year. So when you have all these different types of food together, that is a problem. That's not just considered one dish. V'tavshil hanasa medavar shnechal kamoshu chai, a dish that's usually can be eaten raw. Mikre tavshil inyan zeh. I'm sorry, something that is made from something which is raw, which could be eaten raw. It's still called a dish, even though it is usually eaten raw. Ve'in chiluk ben tzlila mavushal inyan zeh. It doesn't matter whether it is roasted. Roasted means cooking on a dry heat, like on a barbecue, or whether it's cooked. Cooked means cooking with liquid, like in a pot. So let's do Sif Dalid. It says, Mutalechel peres kishem chayan afilu kamaminum. Fruit, though, you could eat many pieces of fruit during this meal. Okay? Because the fruit, they're not cooked. Okay. Alright, and we'll see what it means about raw, what we just read. Now let's do the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnei minim perish v'adam echad ena yachal la'achal shteyem. One person can't eat both of them. Ava yachal ruvein la'achal tavshil echad v'shimon echad. You can make it from two different types. We said here. V'shtei kederos. Okay, this is the next one. V'chein yish la'achmer lazar mishnei minim b'keder achas. Right, we're saying that if you make a dish that has two ingredients like cheese and eggs or something, one person can't eat it, but you could make it together and one person eats the cheese and one person eats the eggs. Shadarka bakach. We said, however, you can put two different types of things together if that's the normal way to do it. Rotzalomer, Sharov hapa'amim nosnim betzalim ubeitzim ba'afurim. Let's say most of the year when you make this seed thing with onions and eggs, that's how it's done. Like they do by, I guess, frying dough with eggs. They used to do back in the day. But fish, you're not allowed to fry with eggs. Because most of the time you make fish, you make with eggs. So he's saying that if this is a dish that you always cook together during the year, then that's considered one dish. But if it's just you're putting two different foods that usually don't go together, that doesn't count as one dish. I guess they had certain cakes that were filled with cheese. That's called two dishes. Wide noodles with cheese, so that's like ziti. Ziti would be a problem to have for the Sudam Avsakas, baked ziti, because you have two dishes. You have the noodles and you have the cheese, so that would be a problem. Since most of the time people don't do this, havishnei tavshilin. That's called two tavshilin. Now, I don't know, maybe ziti nowadays, it's more common in the times of the Mishnah Berurah to put it together, but I don't know, it seems like Many times people have noodles without cheese and cheese without noodles. Mikre tavshula inyan zeb. It's called a dish for this. V'aftal in b'shulei akam ein shem tavshil shem tavshulav kegon chalav shenizbashul kiyotzibo le'inyanenu aser de'ikar hatam she'asru b'shnei tavshilin mishum de'beriboy tavshilin yesh kavod v'tayim. So what's he talking about here? He's talking about something that is, even if it's usually eaten raw, if you cook it, it's still considered a dish. Now, why is that relevant? Because there's a halacha called bishul akum. A Jewish person isn't allowed to eat something that was cooked by a non-Jew. This was something that was instituted by the rabbis in order to keep the Jewish people separate from the non-Jewish people, in order that there shouldn't be intermarriage, because the Jewish people very strongly believe that Jews should marry other Jews in order to pass our values down to the next generation. So that means that for that reason, the rabbis instituted that a person can't eat food that was cooked by a non-Jew. So there are many exceptions and rules to this, but one of the rules is something that which is usually eaten raw, there's no prohibition a bishul akum when a non-Jew could cook it. So, for example, milk. Milk is drinking raw. Drinking raw. So if if a non-Jew cooks milk, it would still be permitted. Now, so he says here, however, for this halacha, it would be forbidden, because in this halacha, it has nothing to do with bishul akum. It has nothing to do with eating something that was cooked by a non-Jew. But here the idea is that if you have two dishes that were cooked, that represents a more fancy meal, and we don't want to have a fancy meal right before Tisha B'Av. So if you would cook milk, let's say, for this meal, that would be a problem, even though it's not usually a problem for bishul akum. Tikar tam she'asu b'shnei tavshilin, v'shem de'rivei tavshilin yish v'kavod ha'tanig v'sek v'enchelik ben tzlim v'lishol kigon beitzim, tzluyim, peris tzluyim, kulim shem tavshil aleim, v'zeh v'shekasu v'kamei kishin chayim, lafukei kishin isbashlu, o nitzlu. So again, even cooking fruit, cooking different types of fruit for this last meal would be problematic, but having fruit, which we said, which is raw, that is a problem. So again, we're learning here that, again, the general idea is that the meal before Tisha B'Av should not be a festive meal, should not be enjoyed. And what we do practically, again, as we mentioned many times, these halakhas don't come up so much, because what we do is have a piece of bread and an egg dipped in ashes and water. With that, wishing everyone a great day.